Hi everybody, I'm Bence Komlósi from the Architecture for Refugees and Architecture for Refugees Schweiz, two NGOs based in Switzerland, and I'm going to be the host and also the guest of tonight's Facebook Live discussion or event on the topic of architecture is a human right. And in a very few words, I would like to introduce you this whole story that we started a few weeks ago with the Emergency Architecture and Human Rights organization and the worldarchitects architectural platform. We started a movement on this topic of architecture is a human right. We developed, mostly the Emergency Architecture and Human Rights developed the manifesto, and in collaboration with these three organizations we started a page and the movement, let's say. This is the website of the World Architects, where you can find the architecture is a human right. I posted it just a few minutes ago on our Architecture for Refugees Facebook page, so you can find the link there. And the aim is very simple. I think we all agree that human rights are important, maybe not all, but I hope every one of us is agree with it. And I think these three organizations for sure agree that architecture is a key element in our health and built environment, so it must be also a human right. And today is the 70th anniversary of the architecture of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That's why we thought that we must have a Facebook Live today. We had a guest, but at the end we had some technical issues, so she cannot join us today. We will try to organize her in the next time. But in the meanwhile, we wanted really to have this discussion. So I'm gonna talk around half an hour tonight, but I would like to invite all of you to read your comments in the questions, thoughts in the comments below this live video, so we can also discuss these issues. I brought also two small manifestos or small toolkits. One of them we developed with the Policy University and the Architecture for Refugees. It was a workshop kind of finding or like project where we said that from the culture of waiting to the culture of care we have to get there. So we have to get from just waiting and having excuses. We have to get to the point where we take actions and really start caring about all of us, so about the whole, not only about humanity but also about the planet Earth where we live. So we developed this list of things, and I think also last week with Rania or with Pedro, and 2 weeks ago with Rania we talked a little bit about this. So listen and respond, which were like in many cases in the last weeks a topic that always came back. No more excuses. So if you want to do something on this field, just do it now with this. Watching this event, sharing this event, inviting your friends, checking our manifesto on the World Architects page, start small discussions in your community with your friends, and so on and so on. Be proactive, so don't wait for someone else. You have to be this kind of thing, this kind of person who make the change, and you have to start these new developments. You have to often bring up new ideas. So I think if you talk about architects, they are often quite innovative or creative, but if you talk about like non-architects, they are also have to come up with new ideas and new initiatives. You must have deadlines. If you don't have deadlines, you will never reach this kind of changing process, so you must start something immediately and have a deadline of, okay, I'm running this project for a while now, for a year, for half a year, and I want to achieve this and that. You have to have tasks also, so if you work together with other friends and communities, then you have to have like who is doing what, talking and doing. Right now we are just talking on these Facebook Lives, but I think all our guests, they are really like doers, so they are working a lot on the field with communities, with human beings who are in need for something, for help or support or just some architecture. And take action, so just do it right now and don't wait for the next weeks. This is also like the statement about you make the change, so really we say that you, all of you, and also all of us, we have to make the change and we have to start immediately something. Every week we We also kind of bring some books. It's a tradition now. From the last 4 events with the 4 guests, I brought 1 books just to like kind of again think it over. What did they talk about? Cyril Hanape was our first guest, who works a lot with his students from Paris on supporting minority groups and using very basic tools, architectural tools, building very basic spaces for communities, for housing and so on. And they work in very different situations. He's also founder of the Actes Cité in France, and he worked in Calais, in the jungle, in Dunkirk, in the refugee camp, or now they are working, or they worked in Mayotte, which is a French colony. Then the second guest was Emilio Brandao. I think he also mentioned this book. It's really about spatial agency, other ways of doing architecture. I think every week this comes back, how can we do architecture in a new way? So it's gonna make architecture available for everybody. So if you talk about human rights, then this must be a must. So it's not only for people with money or with a lot of money, but also really for everybody. And so this book is the second one. Then with Rania Kavazma, we talked about, I think, quite a lot about arrival cities. So these 2 books are about kind of this issue. Doug Sanders talks about arrival cities in a little bit theoretical or like really like general way. And then the Making Heimat Germany Arrival Country book, it's really talking about architecture, it's talking about, but also about informality in arrival cities, or the importance of affordable spaces, situations. So I think these books are all very, very interesting to a little bit start dealing with the topic of architecture is a human right. And last but not least, last week we had Pedro Neto, who is doing some projects, research. He's more an academic researcher, but he's doing projects in Angola, and this book has nothing to do with this, but it's about the Western Sahara refugee camps from Manuel Hertz. So I think this book is also very interesting. It has a lot of text and graphics, so it's also somehow architectural, but also non-architectural. Movement in the desert, so the freedom of movement, it's a one human right, so I think this book is also very important and interesting. We also have in our manifesto a call, so we invite all of you to bring your thoughts, to bring your books, projects, institutes, and people you know who are doing something on this field of architecture as a human right. I think it's a must that we have to collaborate and we have to start dealing together with this issue. Please check the previous episodes on our YouTube channel. It's Architecture for Refugees. We already uploaded the first 3, and now it's coming with Rania, and it's coming with Pedro very soon. And please follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, YouTube, and we also have a newsletter, so please subscribe on Facebook to our newsletter so we can keep in contact and we can really spread the word of architecture as a human right, or about humanity and spaces in this kind of identity and space issues. Please do share our projects and pages in your network, because it's very important. That's how we spread this topic and this issue. And if you have any questions, please comment it during the Facebook Live. So that's it. And please write an email to us if you have anything to say. And see you very soon. On the next week or in the next few weeks, we will have, maybe not every week because of the Christmas period. I'm not sure how we will manage it, but we will for sure start again in 2019. So this is the very first intro about this weekly Facebook Live discussion. I'm checking if someone has already made any comments. No comments yet, but this last book, I think it's also interesting to mention, Architecture and Human Rights. I think I'm gonna bring it like almost every week to talk about this because it's very interesting. It contains the 30 articles of human rights, like such as freedom and right to remedy by competent tribunal, freedom for arbitrary arrest and exile, right to life, liberty, and personal security. So I think it's very interesting. Ole. Sorry. So I think it's also very interesting to see how the previous YouTube discussions with our experts and amateurs and professionals, how they mention these human rights. So last week we talked about security, we talked about gatekeep communities, such as very like further developed way of security and space and architecture and so on. And the right to community, I think it's also one of the very interesting issues. So please check also the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on the UN's page. If you Google Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you will get this page where they summarize the 30 articles, what does it mean in a very short way. But it's also very interesting, and I think we also talked about this in the previous weeks, that as this World Economic Forum article kind of states, that human rights are still super far away for many people. So only 39% of the global population is free, 24% is partly free, and 37% is not free. So it's super important to see that there is still a lot to do to make human rights available for everybody. And as Roosevelt wrote when they declared this universal human rights, he says that it's continually evolving through countries worldwide. So I think this architecture is human right. It's also a kind of evolution process. So we really aim to make architecture human right because we believe that our space is really influencing our health, our security, our human rights. So if without these spaces, we would lack many rights. Yeah, so this is about the human rights, and then you can find this architecture is a human right page on the World Architects, where we talk about this issue, and where we also have a manifesto, a very short one, and we have some historical references, and we have some kind of perspectives. So we bring the human rights, the 30 articles, and we try to compare or to find architectural aspects to these subtopics. And I would say we managed, or right now we are having around 7 to 10 issues where architecture is really like strongly involved. So adequate standard of living is one of the articles. So I think it's a kind of very basic thing. Right to work, freedom of association, right to education. I think for me, it's probably the most important. If you have right to education, then you also kind of need a school. What is that? A school can be like an open space, but I think it's very depend on the climate and so on. So there is also this kind of historical summary on the World Architects page, and so we also have here this call. So we invite you to contact us and bring your thoughts. I would like also invite all of you for the next weeks. If any of you have the feeling that you must be a guest in these weekly discussions, then please do contact us and let us know what is your topic connected to architecture and human rights. You can be a professional or an amateur, it doesn't really matter, I would say. What is important for us, it's really to bring this architecture available, make it available for the whole society, for everybody. That's why I would even say that non-architects are a little bit more welcome than architects, but let's say 50-50. What else do we have? I think we have notes, and I would also a little bit mention the previous weeks, what happened. Cyril Hanapé talked a lot about civic architecture, so how can architects be a kind of moderators in a civic development, how a community can involve architects, or how can an architect offer her work for a community. And then Emilio Brandau talked about, again, about this kind of citizen engagement, but also talked about the role of architects. So I think it's very, very important to discuss this role of architects. So the mainstream architecture, I think we all see. What does it do? It's like waiting for a client, and the client comes with money. It can be an investor, or it can be a developer, or a municipality, and then the architects respond to this. But we also believe that architects could be proactive and could develop new responses to the basic needs. If they see situations, communities where they lack architectural quality, housing, community spaces, public spaces, then architects could start developing projects, could start developing new answers for these basic problems. And the responsibility of architects, I would say, if architecture is a human right, then the responsibility of architects is amazing, is huge. So we have to also realize that our work is very important for the human rights. I think there is more and more architectural institutes, university programs where they discuss this topic. So I think to talk about these institutes will be also interesting and will be a goal for us in the next weeks. But on the other hand, we really would love to bring this very theoretical issue of human rights to a practical level. So always we try to ask and invite people, guests who are kind of field workers also. So they work together with communities. In the case of all our previous guests, I think it was there. Rania Kavazma works in the US, in Seattle, with communities and developing amazing ideas and projects from a booklet which helps newcomers to understand the arrival or welcoming city structure and how does it work, how can they just simply buy a book or laundry, doing laundry, and so on. And then she also talked quite a lot about very fundamental things like the rights of all of us, so the rights of women, for example, in our societies, and the role of women architects in the architectural society or in our built environment. And she summarized in a very simple way that it's still not enough, so we have to do much more architects, women architects must be involved in this development, in the decision making, and so on and so on. I would say I totally agree with this, mostly because our Facebook pages, all the Architecture for Refugees, Architecture for Refugees Schweiz, or Architecture for Refugees USA, shows that around 70% of the followers, of the people engaged, are women, and only 30% of them are men, which shows a very strange inequality in another way. So the decision making is still for men, but the social engagement is more for women. So I think it's very interesting data. So she also mentioned, Rania, again, about community work, about working with community and not helping them, but making with them an exchange where everybody profits something. And I think it's also important that she mentions about that we have to know the culture of these communities. I know that it's mirrored, but it's always mirrored. So for the YouTube, it will be better. Okay. So working together with different communities, with different cultural backgrounds, she said, like, sometimes you won't know the local community's cultural background and needs, but you can work together with local architects, with local developers, so your support can even be on a more abstract way. Then Pedro Neto talked a little bit about gated communities as well, and about isolated communities. So I think it was an interesting discussion about, let's say, a theoretical wall, who is in and who is out, and what is about if we talk about refugee camps, or what if we talk about gated communities. And yeah, he mentioned this kind of who is receiving these basic rights, and so we really have to realize that only still 39% of human beings are free. So there is still 61% who is lacking human rights and lacking, I would even say, spaces for human rights. So we have a lot to do. I would love to invite you to join this movement, and we have to do it together. And the big question, how can we create inclusion? So how can we make this thing available for everybody? I think there was a lot of posts today about this whole topic of human rights on Facebook, on Twitter, on all the social media platforms. And one of them, I think it says that that human rights are not like a pie where if someone else is getting one you will get less. So I think it's really about all of us. So if human rights is available for everybody, then we're gonna create a real inclusion where we can work together, we can live together in a more balanced way, and we are not just gonna live next to each other. I don't know if there's any questions. It would be great after these 20 minutes of blah blah. If there would be like questions from you, please let me know. If not, I would bring a few more thoughts from this book. I think it's very interesting. The author uses mostly very specific examples, stories from individuals in the beginning of the book, and then she has statements, very different statements, and one of them is this kind of reality. So what do universal rights hold for you, for me, and for us? It is one of the questions. So I think it's a good question because we have very different background, we have very different current state resources, where we live, it has different climate and so on. So this question is very important to discuss. And I would say I will wait for a few more questions, but there is no more questions. I would like finalize with this whole discussion with this again Roosevelt kind of quote where he talks about let's say communities. So I'm just reading this quote. Where after all do universal rights begin? In small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. So at home, or in your community, in your friendship. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerned citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world. For me, this means that we have to look around in our neighborhood, in our communities, and we have to realize if there is anyone who is lacking these basic human rights, and if there is, we must do something because we are responsible for other people, I would say. So I think that's why we do Architecture for Refugees, because we realize that there is a lot of people in our cities, countries, they are lacking human rights. We can talk about refugees who live in situations, refugee camps, very unhealthy. They lack communities, freedom of movement even. So, or not even refugees, but like sometimes asylum seekers, sometimes even like people without state. So we have to learn these things, and we have to understand what's going on around in our world. I don't know if you have anything to say, Rania. I hope you watch this as well. Maybe not, but or you guys, is there any further questions? If not, I'm gonna finish today's very simple, very fast video. I don't like to talk alone, but since there was some technical issues with our guests today, at the end I just said okay, don't wait, let's do it alone. So hopefully in the next weeks I will have guests again, and we can develop this topic of architecture is a human right together with other amazing individuals, I would say. As I see from the last weeks, very, very important work they do. So no more questions. See you in a few weeks or next week, and have a nice evening or day, and don't hesitate to share and don't hesitate to contact us. Bye bye.